can't scare me with this.
Oh yeah, we're talking about that today. Hello everybody, I am Shawggy101, and I'm going to be talking about Lavos, and the problems that DE has made for him to where it's becoming an alarming degree. It seems that with the Delux Skin coming out, that we don't actually see any possible future buffs to Lavos, because his most recent-ish nerf he received was when the Archons had first been released, and it was a ninja patch. Ninja patches do exist in Warframe, whether you like to say it or not, because his nerfs were not displayed on the patch notes. Now, if it was displayed on the patch notes, I'll be happy to go ahead and change that statement, but last I had checked the patch notes, this was not stated on the patch notes for how bad his nerf was. Now, this is his second nerf, not his first nerf. His first nerf came after his release, where the second nerf came by the Archons, and they haven't buffed him since. They haven't touched him since, the Archons, nothing. And it becoming a major disconnect, even when it came to the Prime. And I'll get into all of these different parts in just a moment. I want to at least first state, first off, for the most part, we're going to be seeing our guns getting buffed. I will talk about that a little bit like near the end of the video, almost a little bit later. But I'm going to mainly talk about Lavos, how he began, how he's continued, his first nerf and buff, because he got buffed as well as nerfed at the same time when he got his first one, not long after release. And then I'm going to talk about the mathematics that he's had before and now, and as well as the nerfs and how bad they affected him. Because both of the nerfs had affected him, the first one in a good way, and the second one in the worst way possible. And most Lavos mains nowadays don't know about it, except for those that have been maining Lavos since the beginning. I myself have mained Lavos since his release, I mained Grendel since his release, and I mained Vauban 3 days after I started playing, which was 2 days after closed beta became open beta on my first account. Shawggy101 is my second account. But I do want to state, I played Lavos for quite a long time, and the reason why he's the most on my account is because at the start, I went with Lavos, Grendel, and Vauban. But when the Xmas rework first came out, I immediately went to purely Lavos. But after the Archons had come out and the major nerfs that he had received, I went right back to Grendel and Vauban because they didn't suffer that badly after all the changes they did with the Xmas. But Lavos was still the most used on my account due by that main reason. So I'm sorry if I may seem I have a bit of some bias, but the thing is I've had to reel it back quite a bit to actually make sure that I am making sure I'm assessing it properly for balance reasons and everything else as well, because I always try to look at one main thing: pure balance. And pure balance is not easy to do, and I understand that, but with what we have available for the game in general, I would state with what I'm going to state in this video for Lavos, I'm going to say at the very end, DE, if you do see this after I post it, I would love for you guys to actually pay attention. Please. This is not to be a diss. This is not to be disrespectful. I want to state this has been going on for too long. And with the Delux Skin coming in for Lavos, this will be bad. Because the depth of how badly he's been gutted and nerfed, and you guys didn't fully address those nerfs and how bad they are, and gave us a band-aid beyond band-aids of a mod, to where now, in order to actually room nuke with him, with his kit specifically, you have to run the Archon mod, which I'm gonna show later, and you have to run Balance Fusion, the augment that you gave us, when you nerfed him from the Archons. introduction. And it is by far the biggest slap to all of us Lavos mains' face. Because it is horrendous of how bad the gutting had been when the Archon mods came out. I understood certain balancing reasons as to why you guys did what you did to him when the Archons came out, but at this point, with the mathematics that I have understood and done and tested by and everything else, you guys did it too far. And at this point, it is unjustified, and he needs to be buffed back a bit. Not fully, but a bit. And I would say he needs buffs in other areas than just buffing him back to what he used to be. Because there's a few other things that he does need help with, which I'll state near the end of the video of what will be needed specifically for him. Now, off to when he was released, and the first nerf. When Lavos was released, we had a new event that had came out, which is known as the Orphix mission. I'm not going to state what the actual event was for its name, because I keep forgetting it half the time, but Orphix missions were what had began with Lavos' introduction. A lot of people don't know much about the Orphix missions, because again, a lot of people don't know Lavos' introduction when he came out, and so on and so forth. There are, of course, a lot of people that do, but the commonality of the community now do not know anything about this, so that's why I'm addressing this. So with Orphix missions, they were a good concept, but the problem was that our Archguns couldn't be able to scale in damage or anything like that in comparison to our primaries and our secondaries, and even our melees. They couldn't be able to keep up in damage because the Orphix mission rewarded you for staying in it longer. But once you got to a point of a C rotation, and this still happens today right now, once you get past the C rotation, it becomes almost impossible to keep it going because the Archguns do not have a way to scale up in damage, like I said, for our primaries, secondaries, and now melees. With the buffs that we're getting to the Archguns, I can see the Orphix missions coming back a bit. Of course, a lot of people don't like Railjack, that's understandable, but I see it coming back a bit because this allows the Archguns to actually have a way to scale in a sense, especially when using with the Necromechs and so on and so forth. A lot of people don't like the Necromechs, a lot of people do. It's a split two sides of the coin, and I understand that. But that event, I had bought Lavos, base Lavos, and his full set, and I was getting his second the second Lavos blueprint during that event, during the Orphix event. And I would state, kudos to my bud Oblivion Love and my other co-founder Fred is Jack. If they didn't actually keep going to the grind like I wanted to, but I just didn't have the feeling for it, we would have hit gold a lot faster, but we still got the gold statue because of those two in our clan dojo, and I do appreciate them for that. But anyways, to Lavos specifically. So after the Orphix mission, you go to Father to go ahead and grab Lavos' parts. You get his main blueprint at rank 3, but you get his other blueprints for his neuroptics systems and chassis at rank 4. And you get the Cedo blueprint at rank 4, but you get the barrel, the stock, and the receiver whenever you're trying to build it afterwards at rank 5. That's how you get Lavos now. Now it comes to the nerf. His first nerf he ever received was about a week, if not 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. He got nerfed because his 4 was doing too much damage. Now, I'm going to go ahead and place on the screen a mathematical equation of how his 4 worked. I'm putting 7500 as the flat base. I'm putting 7500 as flat for the base, for the equation, as that's the damage normally when you don't imbue the element. and then you'll see 15,000 as after you imbue the element, which is heat. Now, you'll see at the very end of this equation, it does the 3 times and when you don't imbue it, and the 6 times when you don't imbue it. That will be discussed when it comes to his second major nerf with the Archgun. So keep those 2 numbers in mind. But as you see here in the equation above on the screen, how Lavos' 4 used to work was it was 7,500 if you didn't imbue heat. Then it would Then it would be to the power of 2 by itself with just 1 element. But any element afterwards, after 2, or after just 1 being on there, it would then go to 7,500 to the power of 2 to the power of whatever extra elements you have afterwards. If it was 1 extra element, that'd be 2 to the power of 2, or 7,500 to the power of 2 to the power of 2. And if it was 5 elements, you had 7,500 to the power of 2 to the power of 5 times 3, and that was then the new equation afterwards for the aftermath. And then you had to do your mathematics afterwards for how heat scales. I'm not going to show it. I'm not going to deal with it. You guys already know how it works and functions. That made it to where just only 5 procs, or not 5 procs, but 5 different elements on a target would be able to reach damages past any room nuke frame in the game, even up to date. He was outscaling everyone with just a couple of elements. Hell, doing 5 is too much. If you did 2 different elements, you would get already closing in on above the average nuke frame. Then, if you add any extra elements afterwards, well, you're going even further than that. Now, the 15,000, that's even worse. But of course, you guys can already guess that it's already just without imbuing it, you're already getting close to reaching damage cap. When imbuing it without using Breach Surge, you're already reaching damage cap. Breach Surge made it hit damage cap faster, which everybody was starting to use Breach Surge on Lavos, which I still have my Breach Surge builds on Lavos, which you'll see in a few. But Breach Surge was like the big thing if you really wanted to maximize on nuke potential with him. Even though you didn't need to, it was helpful because enemies that didn't get hit with elements or primed from the elements of your Cedo, your nuke core, or whatever, could be able to keep the damage flowing all throughout. And it'd be able to keep damage going to units that didn't get primed, so it helped it be able to reach further out than it should have. Now, besides that main point, they had to nerf that specifically. Now, the buff they did, and I'll speak about how they did the nerf in just a second. We're going to get right to that. I'm going to first state about the buff because this was a major buff. Lavos' 4 back in the day was 60 seconds. They then reduced that to 30 seconds when they made the nerf and buff. The reducing from 60 seconds to 30 seconds is the buff part of the ability. That was the buff part. The nerf part, they made it to where it was to the power of, now it goes to a whole separate equation. And I'll show the equation up now on the screen. So you have 7,500 to the power of 2 times the 5, let's say it's 5, because with how Blast used to work back in the day, Blast just stuck on, so the Cedo alt fire could be able to give 5 elements other than any element you would put on the weapon already. But I'm not counting any extra element on the weapon, I'm just saying the Cedo alternate fire at base. You're hitting about 5 elements. Maybe 6 if you're counting the slash, but that's if the slash would show up. But it didn't show up enough to make it count. So that's why I stayed 5. So you have 7,500 to the power of 2 times 5, then times 3 when you wouldn't imbue heat. Then, when you would imbue heat, it's 15,000 to the power of 2 times 5 times 6. And that's how it went down he was able to be on par now, as long as a unit was primed with the Cedo or anything like that, that at least had 5 elements or whatever, he could be able to scale with all the other rune nukes. And he was able to one-tap Acolytes as long as you primed them with enough elements. Nowadays, that don't happen, and that will be discussed later in the video. But that, with what we're getting with the buffs to, or the nerfs specifically, correction, the nerfs to damage attenuation, I hope, and I hope, hardly and heavily hope, that with what I'm stating that DE, I hope you guys actually do, I hope you guys actually give the buffs that I state, because if you give the buffs that I state, with also the damage attenuation nerfs, I can see Lavos extremely bouncing back from this. And you guys will, and I can hear already people typing in the comments, shut up, let me finish. Type at the end of the video, don't start typing until you've watched the whole thing. Trust me. Trust me when I say that. Because there is a lot here, and I understand that, but this is how bad Lavos has been screwed. So, now, I'd like to get to Lavos' second nerf. Archon mods. They came out with the Archons and with the Grendel rework, all coming out all at the same time. One big shebang, shaboom. Absolutely awesome. I do not like the Grendel rework, but that's another video for another day. But, with the Archons, we got these lovely things called the Archon mods. Now, Lavos could be able to semi-abuse them, but it was able to be extremely helpful with him. Now, the issue is that only 3 of those abilities are good on him. Only 3 of those abilities, or not the abilities, only 3 of those Archon mods are good on him. And even one of them is like, okay, why would you do that? Which is specifically Archon continuity. Like, I understand if you want to make duration builds with him, I can see that being used. Yeah, I'm not gonna diss it. I understand it. But most of the time I'm sitting there going, why? Why would you do this? You know what? I'm not gonna try. I'm not gonna try and get against it. Because I'm not, like I said, I'm not gonna knock on it. Because I can see the potential in it. But, with what they did to him specifically, and I mean what they did to him, is too far. So you remember how I stated with the previous equation for his 4, if you didn't imbue the element of heat into it, you got 3 stack, you got times 3, and if you do imbue the element of heat, you got times 6 at the end of that equation. That was for all of his abilities. We are going to turn to Lavos' 1. I'm not going to talk about the passive, because that one's self-explanatory. I'm going to move to Lavos' 1, because these, the 1, 2, 3, and 4, is what got the major nerfs. The passive didn't get touched. That's why I'm not touching over the passive for now. Number 1, his first ability. Lavos' first ability, it heals per each target he hits, as well as by the damage that the one has dealt to the target. Now, this is extremely helpful with how he is a health tank DE, and we'll get to that in a bit. The reason why I state it that way. But he's a health tank. He is a health tank rune nuke. But he's a conditional rune nuke at that. And he was made to be a conditional rune nuke. Now, with what we have, his first ability, before these Archon mods came in, when you would throw out the 1, you would get 3 stacks of Toxin when not imbuing it, and 6 stacks of Toxin when you would imbue the Toxin damage into it. You get 6 stacks instead. Now, with showing of the test here, whenever you don't imbue it, we get 1. That's it. 1 stack. Whenever we imbue Toxin, we used to get 6. Now we get 2. 2 stacks. Why, DE? Why? This is bad. I'm gonna see this as a forefront already. That is a third of his damage gone. It may not have been a lot of damage to a lot of people, but to be honest, with me and a lot of other Lavos mains that have been maining him since his release, know that that actually fucking hurts. That really hurts. It hurts us a lot, because that's a third of his damage, and we're gonna continue with this. His second ability is the only ability that didn't get touched. I kid you not. It is the only ability that didn't get touched. If you don't imbue cold, you get 3 stacks on the initial hit, and it just keeps scaling up with 3 stacks afterwards. Whenever it comes to imbuing cold, you get your 6 stacks on initial, and you still get 3 stacks per each time it procs afterwards. That is the only one that stayed. Keep that in mind. It is his weakest ability, it is used to help spread statuses, but it is the weakest, and it is the worst. It is only the best when you're wanting to use it for status spreading, which it's good for, don't get me wrong, it is good for status spreading, but that ain't helping. So I understand why they didn't give it any buffs, and they didn't nerf it as well. It was in an equilibrium state where if you nerfed it, it'd be shit. If you buffed it, it'd be strong. So it's good as is. Understandable. Now, we go to his 3. His 3, it does multiple good things. Multiple supportive and helpful things for everybody in the party and everything like that. You wanna know what that does? Oh, your 3 changes all ammo type to universal ammo. Already outpacing the universal ammo pickups you get from dispensary, which I'm going to knock on it. Y'all keep forgetting Lavos exists because of his 3. His 3 literally outdoes dispensary tenfold. He is the best with Archguns. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He gives health. He changes health and energy orbs into universal orbs. These are helpful for everybody across the board, as well as for Lavos. It is just helpful no matter who it is. Universal orbs are amazing, so that's where Lavos is extremely good with. That's not the only thing it does. It has, at base, 1.5 second cooldown reduction. It reduces the cooldowns of all abilities that are on cooldown, except for itself. It will reduce all abilities that are on cooldown per each enemy electrocuted. And when you don't imbue it, we usually got 3 stacks, and it would keep stacking 3 times, giving us 3 stacks per each proc again and again and again, to now we get 1. And it gives us 1 stack each time. And you have to put it up against a wall in order to be able to get the up to 3 stacks. If we go ahead and imbue the electric with electric, or the third ability with electric, let me get that correct. Whenever we would imbue the third ability with electric, we would get 6 stacks of electric on every single tick and proc. Now, we're only getting 2. And with that, you have to put it up against a wall and hope to God an enemy sitting up against the wall where you put that thing in order, and have to wait the full duration of that ability in order to get the 6 stacks that it would have originally, because it only procs 3 times before disappearing. Because the thing is that duration does not affect any of Lavos' abilities except for his 2 and the passive's Augment. That is it. There is nothing else that thing helps out. Hence why duration is seen as one of the most useless types of things to put on the Lavos, for the most part. Last but not least, it is his 4. Lavos' 4, as I stated earlier with his first nerf, it had been changed around to where it does the 3 stacks when not imbued, and the 6 stacks when imbued. It also would double its previous damage for whenever you would imbue it, before it does those stacks of heat. Without Archon continuity, or not Archon continuity, Archon vitality, sorry about that. Without Archon vitality, he only gets 1 stack when you don't imbue it with heat. We went from 3 to 1 stack. 3 stacks to 1. Barely any damage. Now, when we used to imbue it, it would double its damage, and we'd be able to get 6 times the heat procs. Now, we get 2. When you don't imbue, when you do imbue it with heat and don't have Archon vitality. Now, I won't have to state this much, and really show this part much, because it's going to be getting very confusing with the Breach Surge build, but I'm going to state this as a forefront. When you put on Archon Vitality, you would think you would get 4 stacks of heat whenever you would imbue it with heat, but instead you only get 3. You have to use Archon Vitality in order to get half of the damage potential that he had beforehand when you would imbue heat into the 4. And if you're not imbuing heat with the 4, you get 2 stacks with Archon Vitality. That's bad. He is still a third off of his damage when putting on Archon Vitality. Half if you're imbuing it with heat, and a third off when you're not imbuing it with heat. Now, it's an interesting interaction whenever you have Breach Surge with Lavos, and now I'm getting into the builds. So the first build you're going to see, for the most part, will be what I had to change up after the Archon mods, and then 1999 with Arcane Bellicose. Before Bellicose was around, I had Guardian, because Guardian extra armor, and we needed the extra armor because he was a health tank. We're gonna talk about the health and stuff like that, and the stats and everything like that later. There's a reason why I'm not gonna be using Lavos Prime much at all in this entire video, because of what they did with him, and I will discuss it later in this video. Won't be too much later, but it will be. Lavos has an issue where now, with the Valence Fusion, you need to have Valence Fusion on, and Breach Surge takes the element that you infuse into the passive with Valence Fusion. It takes that element, and it overwrites the radiation damage as that new element. So if you place it as heat, it will count as an ability casting heat, which will then be able to get Vitality to proc the heat proc twice. I have to use this build to get close, keyword, close, to what I was able to do for damage potential back in the day, without augments. The second build is the build I always ran with Breach Surge. Sure, I'm showing at the moment with only the Surging Blades, but that was because I had to overwrite this build and I forgot to remove Surging Blades. But this build is, of course, remove Arcane Bellicose and put on Guardian. This was the original build for the longest time. Me and my old bud Oblivion Love, we both are Lavos mains, and we've been maining him since his release. We both ran this build with Guardian instead of Bellicose. Once the Molt Augmented came out, we brought on Molt Augmented. Before Molt Augmented, we had, like, I think it was like Avenger or something like that we had on him. Because whenever he got damaged, it was almost guaranteed every time that he gets damaged because he's a health tank. So, we had Avenger and we had Guardian during that time. Until Zerman, which then changed it up to Molt Augmented, and then with me now changing Guardian out for Bellicose, because I was trying to see if Bellicose could help out, which thankfully Bellicose does help a little, but I'm still nowhere close to the damage potential I used to do back in the day. And I'm stating that as a forefront. Now, if we go back to this build, the first one, I'm going to first show the difference between the first build and the second build. The first build with Breach Surge is needing the Archon mod and is needing to use the Archon mod and needing to use the Augment mod. Now, with that to take into account, this is how bad it is actually, folks. To take that into account, you'll see that the damage will be very inconsistent, and the amount of units that die will be very inconsistent with running that build. And I'm using Eximus specifically because normal units do die, but it's still even inconsistent, but it's less inconsistent with the Eximus. And I know there's not that many you'll not get that many Eximus in a run, but I'm using the Eximus as a standpoint for when you're going into longer ranges into the mission. Like going into levels 300, 400, 500, 600, 7, stuff like that. Basically, in the higher levels, and even in Elite Archimedia, is where this gets finicky and fishy, as well as your damage falls off hard because of how bad they nerfed it. So, you'll see that the inconsistency with the build with using the Vitality. And now I'm going to show you the build without the Archon Vitality and without using Valence Fusion. So my old build, yes, I'm still using Bellicose. As I said, it actually helps a little bit to get close back to what I used to have for damage. And with this, you see that I actually had to take a longer setup to actually make the damage worth it. I have to use Epitaph, I have to use I have to use Nucor, but I'm using Epitaph in the video. And I'm also having to still use my Cedo a couple of times. I'm gonna say this right now, everybody. For those that are watching still, and I thank you that if you are, I'm stating this right now. I did not have to take this amount of time to actually do this, by the way. This would only take me about a second. I would be able to hit my Breach Surge and my 4 at the same time, because you can animation cancel those two together and hide the 4 when you're using Lavos. A lot of people don't know that, now you do. This would take me more time, because I would just shoot Cedo Altfire, hit Breach Surge, hit 4, and then boom, the whole room's gone. Now I have to take more time to actually hit more units, switch to my secondary, hit some units, switch to my primary, hit the units again, hit my Breach Surge, hit the 4, and then I do my nuke. This takes more time, and it's still inconsistent. It is still inconsistent, is how bad this is. This is where I've had to put my foot down stating, DE, buff him. Buff him. He needs buffs. And this is where I'm now going to show the difference as well with these builds against Acolytes. Because the previous build, of my second build specifically, my second build usually one-shots Acolytes, and that was before the Archons really were coming in. Now I'm going to show you first with the first build using the Archon Vitality and the Archon... Or not the Archon Vitality. The Archon Vitality and using the Augment for Valence Fusion with Breach Surge, and you'll see that I am actually struggling quite a decent bit, and even when the damage hits, it's barely chunking him, because it only has 1 stack of heat from that, if not even 2 stacks of heat from it. It is not enough to make it count anymore, DE, is how bad this is. With this build, I theorized that I'd be able to easily tap through an Acolyte's health so quickly, with at least 5 elements on that target. No. And then you'll see in the second Acolyte was using the second build, and you're seeing that the same damage, if not even a little bit smaller, by maybe a few pixels of damage, done to that target with more elements when I hit them with the 4. When the 4 hit them exactly, had more elements on it in order to be able to reach this just about damn near the same damage previously to an Acolyte, where this build used to 1-tap Acolytes, if not 2-tap, maybe 3-tap, without armor stripping. And now I'm having to worry about the armor, I'm having to worry about all this other stuff, and I have to use the previous build. This is how bad DE nerfed Lavos, and nobody knows this. Only a amount of Lavoses that have been maining him since his release only know about this. This is how bad it is. Anyone that says that he needs a rework is a major issue. No matter what. Anyone who says that he needs a rework don't understand how bad he's gotten it. Not only that, with all of these that I have shown, I would like to now talk about the Prime and the Base Lavos and their differences. When DE did the health changes and everything like that, the base stats for Lavos at base was 600 health and 600 armor. I'm not paying attention to the shields for a reason here, because I want you to pay attention to the health and the armor for the base Lavos. Base Lavos. He was 600 health and 600 armor. This was reduced after the health changes. I had in total on my base Lavos, with having the full Archgun mod setup, 2275 HP. 2275 was the HP. And my Bud Oblivion is a witness to this, because he also remembers his Lavos having that amount of HP. Because again, we had the same build. So, to take that into account, I'm now looking at the Prime, and you'll see the difference between the Prime and the base, and you'll see that they removed 60 HP from the base, gave it to the Prime, gave him shields, and removed 25 armor from him, and didn't give it back to him. Lavos is a health tank. He cannot shield gate. Whoever thought about putting that in at DE's headquarters, slap them, please. Because they don't know this shit at all. I can definitely see that they can't, and they don't. That needs to be changed, DE. You want to make this a good Prime? I've stated to a few friends of mine, and even on stream, Lavos is an actual failure. His guns are good, the Prime weapons are good, but the Prime himself is bad. And that's because you did him dirty. Real dirty. I would have never fucking said a word if you didn't nerf his abilities like they have been and buffed them back a little bit, or changed it up enough to where all of his abilities have condition overload, which I'll get to that in a minute. And his Prime release being as bad as it is. This, again, is a slap to all Lavos mains. It is. To the oldest Lavos mains, to be more specific. Because newer Lavos mains don't know about these issues, and I hope newer Lavos mains actually understand this issue, is how bad this is. There's a lot of other Warframes that have gone through stuff like this before, but the thing is that DE has tried to buff them back a bit, or they reworked them fully. But the biggest problem is Lavos. Lavos has been nerfed for this long. Nerfed. Not outpaced, nerfed. Because when he received that nerf in the Archons, he was able to keep up with all the other rune nukes. Of course, too much nuking became a problem for him either way, which is going to be a video for another day to talk about specifically. But since he's a conditional rune nuke, if you have more than one rune nuke other than himself, then he's not going to do anything. He's not going to be able to do anything. If you're running constant AoE, he's not going to be able to do anything because of how things work for him now. But after all these nerfs, oh yeah, no, you have to have the Augment. It is not even a band-aid, it is a mandatory now. If you want to do what he used to be able to do back in the day, you have to mandatory put on that augment. This is why I tell people do not pick up Lavos. I tell people, you get that prime if you want to. Get that prime, get it maxed out, don't touch him again until they buff him. If you so as much rework him too much, or rework him at all DE, you've lost me. And I've been playing this game for 12 years. I've been playing this game 2 days after closed beta became open beta. And this is bad. This is real bad. Whether you like it or not, this is bad. You need to buff him. Do at least some buffs. You don't have to do all buffs. Do some buffs before the Deluxe Skin comes out, before October 18th. Which is why I'm making this video as early as I can. Last but not least, I'm going to state about the Archguns, the Archguns, and I'm going to state about my conclusion of how to take care of Lavos for the future. For the Archguns issue, Lavos is the only one who has an augment that gives him elements that works to the Archguns, but the other Warframes will not, and I'll show you here. You'll see that I went ahead and imbued Corrosive on my Lavos. On my Larkspur, I only have the Viral and Electric, and of course the Impact and the Radiation that Larkspur naturally has. I shoot my Larkspur, and you see that I have the Viral and all that. I then turn on my Balance Fusion, and then hit my Corrosive, get it out the gun, and you see that the Corrosive procs. Now here's where the issue is, DE, and I hope you guys do change this and buff this and fix this, especially because this affects all Warframes, by the way, that are like this. I go ahead and take my Saren, same build, but instead I have, for my Archgun, I use just gas and electric. Instead of viral and electric, I use gas and electric, because the Saren build that I have is a Gunzerker Saren build. Which it works, trust me, it does work. And I wanted to turn her into a Gunzerker, so I used Nourish with her instead, and you'll see that I have her one augment that gives corrosive damage to her weapons, and to her allies as weapons. Now, when I start shooting enemies, you'll see before I turn on Nourish, there's no viral. I turn on Nourish, there's viral. I turn on her Toxic Lash, the toxin shows up. But once I turn on that one augment, the corrosive doesn't show up at all. The only corrosive proc you saw for a moment was because my Driga got in range to tag it, but you see now every other target is not getting the corrosive. This happens to all Warframes that have these types of augments. This happens to Ember, this happens to Frost, this also happens to Volt, this happens as well to Oberon. Now, I didn't show those four, but I did go through tests with each of them, and I just used Saren as the main face of this, because Saren is my most used when it comes to using Gunzerking, at least recently. I've only done this recently because I don't really like playing Room Nukes most of the time. The only Room Nukes I like is, well, Lavos, because Lavos is a conditional, and I like to feel the satisfaction of stacking up statuses on an enemy to then nuke it. But the problem is that it's worse now. So that's why I'm saying we need to now buff him. And now on to what you as DE should do. And if any of you do see this, and I hope you guys do, because this is badly going to be needed. Last but not least, my conclusion and my thoughts on this video. And as well as my thoughts on the buffs that Lavos needs for all of his abilities. I'm going to state, for the most part, his 3. His 2 doesn't need to be changed. His 3 definitely needs to get some buffs. I'm going to state, if you can, up the base range of that, because I almost have the max range you can put on a Warframe. And I'm going to say this now, that's small. That is very small. you need to grow that bigger. I would say at base, give it 10 meters. Because we have other third abilities that do certain mechanics, kind of like how Lavos' is, and has a wider range to it at base. Please, for the love of God and all that is holy, please buff that range to at least 10 meters. Please. And then the last part I'm going to state for his 3, and then I'm going to move on to the other abilities. His 3, give that efficiency scaling a little bit more to work with, because 1.5 is very small. Now, I can understand, like, the worry about it. Oh, well, if people build efficiency and stuff like that. If you want to build him into a proper room nuke, you have to go pure strength, which means you have to sacrifice efficiency. I'm not kidding. You have to sacrifice efficiency for that. So, DE, up that from 1.5 at least to 2. Please, at least put it to 2. Because that would be better. To be dead honest. That would be better. Because otherwise, the cooldown rate is atrocious. You have to hit so many units anyways. And the thing is, you have to hope that you hit that many units. And with how the current meta is and how much the Lavos has been thrown out, fix that, please. Give that 3 a buff. And I'm going to state this across the board for all of his abilities. Give it back the 3 stacks when not imbued, and give it back the 6 stacks when imbued. I kid you not, I ran the numbers and I ran the math with Archon Continuity and Archon Vitality and Archon Intensify, and it's not as bad as you think it would be. It's not even that bad at all. I kid you not, DE. You massively fumbled on this when it comes to balancing. You massively and majorly fumbled on Lavos when you did this. You did such an oversight that you now made it a problem. He has to sit in the cuck chair, is how bad it is. To his 1, we leave it as is. As I stated, leave it as is. If you don't ever want to buff any of the stacking back, which is honestly bad if you don't, but if you don't want to stack it, I have an alternative. Make every single one of his abilities have the condition overload that his 4 has. If you don't want to do that. If you don't want to give him back his stacks, you make every single ability condition overload. All of them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All of them scale and damage. You make that as a passive built in, that's not going to be an augment, that is passive. Build it in with it. Because if you're not going to give him back his stacks, he needs condition overload for all of his abilities. I had to really think about it here, and I know what I'm stating, and I know what I'm talking about. I have checked the balance. I have always checked for balance. You need to either make a condition overload for all the abilities or give him back his stacks. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's the main buff he needs. The 3 is the only buff I stated, like, hey, buff those 2 stats a little bit, because that even hurt even when I was playing him before we had this major nerf from the Archons. It was still a pain to deal with especially with everybody running constant AoE. And that's why I'm stating, please give that back. Give it back to us, please. Give us back our stats that we had, because Lavos was supposed to be the best for that, and he's not anymore. Every other frame that you're bringing out slowly, like Temple, is doing better than he is, which already is triggering me and a lot of other older Lavos mains, majorly. You need to stop that. I'm not kidding. If you're going to do that to other frames, you buff Lavos. That is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You buff him back. Because he was supposed to be the absolute face of this, and you removed his face from it. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I state this, but this is bad, DE. Like, come on. I always look for pure balance, and that was too far for nerfs. So, my last words that I'm going to state for Lavos. DE, please do buff this. If anybody at DE does see this, please send the word. Fix it. Please. You're showing me and a lot of other Lavoses that You're scared of him. From his first nerf, you've been scared of him. You need to stop that. Because you hurt him so bad. He has to have augments in order to function now. And actually do good now. And I'm saying this now as a forefront. That is bad. If you need a necessity to put on the augment to function, you failed balance. That's not even a joke. That's not even to be a diss. That's just outright. You failed at balance if you have to use an augment as a way to band-aid your issue you have caused. This needs to come back. I understand with what you're worried about. I've ran the numbers. You will be fine. The balance will be fine. He will not outpace everybody else. He will be perfect and figuring everything out all by himself. He'll be able to function by himself, and he'll be able to function with other room nukes. He won't outpace anybody. He'll be leveled with everyone else. I understand with a lot of people stating that he's not great because we have other ways of priming, like from Derega or from Hounds, and you don't want to waste a weapon slot. I understand that. That's fine. And I had stated beforehand to people before, they don't understand Lavos. They don't know or understand Lavos, and I'm stating by everything. So I hope this at least makes people learn and understand a little bit more about Lavos. And again, DE, please check what I stated about the Archguns as well. Even though it was brief, I made sure it was a good point to put in. Please check that out. Otherwise, everyone, if you want to see more videos or be able to know when I'm streaming, like, sub, leave a comment or anything like that, and ring the bell for all notifications. Otherwise, DE, I beg, buff Lavos before the 15th. I'm not saying everything. If it's too much, at least buff some of it back by the time of his deluxe. Because if you want to get more sales out of the Delux Skin, I would state the best way to get that is by buffing him back at least a little bit. So until then, be good everybody. I will see you guys again. And until next time, peace to you all.